Welcome back to the Spirit, Mind and Soul podcast. Today I'm speaking with Laura. Laura currently lives in Portugal. She's a homeschooling mama, just like myself. She took her son from the UK over to Portugal to start a brand new life. And in this episode, she shares everything that led up to her making that decision. Laura is a conscious businesswoman and Kangen water distributor, and she has some inspiring words for anyone wishing to live an alternative lifestyle. If you're enjoying these podcast episodes, I'd love it if you could subscribe. Every little helps me grow this channel. You'll also be notified when new episodes come out. For now, here's Laura. Hi, Laura. Thank you so much for coming on the Spirit, Mind and Soul podcast. I know that this is the first time you've done an interview like this, sharing your story, your life story. So it's honestly my pleasure to be able to be the first person to interview you like this and for you to share your story. I know we spoke a bit before and you told me about the life that you've had. You've lived in lots of countries, and I can't wait to hear more about that because it's obviously led you to the life that you're leading now. So can you tell us about that, where you were born and where you grew up? Because it's an
Yeah,
interesting
so I
story.
am French, but actually I spent most of my life abroad. I spent the first 20 years of my life in Africa with my parents. And then after that, I lived in India. I also traveled to lots of other countries. In the meantime, my parents were moving a lot, so we used to travel all the time to lots of different places. Um, so then I was in India. Then I lived in France for 10 years. Finally, eventually, I did settle in Paris for some time. Um, and then I lived in England for 17 years. Meanwhile, I've always loved traveling. I've spent time in Australia back and forth for work. I've spent quite a lot of time in North America for work as well. And I've traveled extensively across Europe. So I've got the travel bug. It's something that I've always had. I've had this
Mm-hmm.
incredible opportunity of um, growing wild and free, in Africa, barefooted, wildlife. It was pretty extraordinary. And I've always had this part of me craving it, craving that freedom, the spirit of discovery, the adventure. Yeah, so 17 years in the UK, it got to a point where I felt I've been here quite long enough. I'd quite actually never been anywhere that long apart from in Africa. But in Africa, I was in different
Mm-hmm.
country. England is a country. I was in Africa, which is a continent, and I traveled, from the north to the south, living centrally as well. Um, and for lots of reasons, I wanted to leave the UK. I don't know if you want me to expand on why I ended up
Yeah.
leaving the UK, why I chose Portugal. Maybe I
So
don't know.
yeah, I mean, I would love to hear more about Africa, life in Africa. And are your parents still there
No,
now?
no, my parents now live in Paris. So my dad is retired 20 years ago. They came back and they bought a house in France and settled in France and are living there now. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's 20 years in Africa, 20 extraordinary years, really, and very formative years, the years of childhood. So I was exposed to so many things, and also came to many realizations growing up. It was a um, real experience in the sense that um, everything was so different to what I had at home. The culture, the people, the languages, the religion. I was exposed to so many different things. But also it made me realize that
Mm-hmm.
the world was very diverse and also very unequal. I saw a lot of poverty. We experienced war in Chad and in Car. So I've seen a lot of suffering from a very early age, and I was very early on made aware of the fact that I was quite privileged. Actually, I was very privileged as a person, as a woman. As well, in certain societies, being a woman is not an easy place to hold. Um, so I felt like um,
Mm-hmm.
I was really quite aware from early age, um, that I was very privileged to live this lifestyle, and that there were many things that I had access to that others didn't have access to. And I think that when you are aware in life that you have a privilege, then you should use it. I feel like the duty is to use it, in order to serve others and help others. And that's always something that I wanted to do. You know, I wanted to use my voice, my power, my strength, um, to represent
Mhm.
others, help others. And I guess that's what inevitably at some point in my life led me to become a humanitarian, and then eventually, I hate to say that, an environmentalist. But there was always this need of eradicating differences and inequality and making the world a better place. And you know, because I was exposed to a lot of different things when I was a child, but equally I was exposed to the
Mhm.
wonders of the world and the beauty of nature. And for me, from a very early age, I had a
Yeah.
very strong connection with nature. um,
Yeah.
I've been running free since I was a child, and I have found it quite difficult. Actually, in fact, when we returned from living in Africa, to be more conditioned, even in my space, as people live here in Europe. I mean, my parents didn't go back and live in the countryside. Huh? We were living in a town, in a townhouse. So I went from living a very free and wild and open lifestyle to, yeah, living in between four walls with a walled garden, and that kind of stuff, which was quite difficult to adjust to. And actually,
Mhm.
I think I never quite adjusted to it, you know. And in if I reflect about it, if I reflect upon it, it's a bit like they were trying to fit me in a box when I'd been running wild. And that's also a little bit what society tries to do to you. That, you know, you have to fit in a box.
Mhm.
And I never quite fit in the house, in the garden, and the box. I think we are meant for deeper
Yeah. I mean,
connection.
what a contrast.
Yeah.
So then you set did you settle in the UK when you had your children? I know your children, your older children are still in the
Yes.
UK. So what was life like? Did you try, and I guess because I know you worked as a humanitarian for a while, which you say wasn't very fulfilling. So how did that come about? Did you try and I guess, have the ordinary life and settle
Yeah.
and do all the things that
Yes,
society says that you
exactly.
need to do?
So, you know, as we came back to Europe, there was also a part of me that didn't really know this lifestyle, and you know, I wanted to experience it. And when I want to experience something, I want to experience it fully. I want a life fully lived, not a life half lived. So I go all in, you know. So I went all in into this lifestyle, and I had
Mm-hmm.
various lives within that lifestyle. I started off as an art dealer. I was an art dealer in Paris for 10 years. I had a very lavish lifestyle. I always thought I would
Mm-hmm.
end up in a penthouse in New York sipping champagne and, you know, with Picasso's on my wall. That was, you know, when I was in my 20s. But
Mm-hmm.
then I think it's also at that point that I was exposed to, I started, I guess, being exposed to more inequality and also corruption, because there are a lot of, you know, when a painting is worth 30 or 4 million, for 30 or 40 million dollars, where does that money come from and where does it go? And also, um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's a whole dark side to the art world. Probably won't expand too much on that. But I think for me that was the
Mm-hmm.
first realizing that actually, you know, it was a way to launder money as well. It was a way to manipulate certain things, and that was power that was only held in certain hands. Um, so that was my first sort of real confrontation, I guess, with the real world, the harsh real world as an adult. Um, and
Mhm.
at the time, it came to a point where it didn't feel right. There were many things that didn't feel right about operating within that environment. I couldn't quite at the time pin down what it was. I just knew that this wasn't actually a life that I wanted to pursue, and that in fact, I wanted to put my life in the service of others and helping other people. So I came to the UK in my 30s, so just at the end of my 20s, in my 30s, with my two first children who had been born in France, and I I tried to live quite a normal lifestyle. I worked at the university for 10 years, and I had a house in Oxford, and just a normal life. But also my children were at ages where at the time I felt they needed to be in school. I was very conditioned by the society in which I was living. So I thought that that was the right thing to do, to stay stable for some time and for
Mhm.
them to follow through their education. And at the time, I also think that that's what they wanted, actually. They're growing up, teenagers, they had their friends,
Yeah.
and they found their spots here and there. And so we ended up staying here. Until eventually they went for university. And at that point,
Mhm. Mhm.
I'd moved on to working from academia to humanitarian. When I moved from the art world to working for the university, because that was pretty much the transition from when I was in Paris working in an art
Mhm.
gallery and going to lots of art fairs around the world. I then moved to academia at the University of Oxford, and I worked in various departments, including the fundraising, the development part of the university. And so I was also there exposed to, yet again, parts of
Mhm.
the world that I actually didn't really like or feel aligned to. And at the time, I met the CEO of a very big British charity, um, a very inspiring woman. And I decided to go and work for that charity. And they were very fulfilling years. I know you said you thought maybe that made me reflect, actually, because they were very fulfilling years. I really devoted
Mhm.
myself fully to the mission and the cause that we were fighting, which was, trying to eradicate poverty. But what I then came to realize is that the
Mhm.
same people trying to fix the problem right at the top are the same people creating the problem. And so my whole vision of the world at that point really crumbled, and I really started questioning everything, my experience in art dealing, my experience in
Mhm.
academia, and now within the humanitarian field. I'm experiencing yet again these discrepancies and these lack of alignment, and I'm also seeing the truth through a lot of things. And I realized that
Yeah.
this isn't who I want to be, and I also don't believe that actually we are really making a difference. And I don't mean by then, I want to be quite careful here about what I'm saying, because I'm not saying that humanitarians don't make a difference. They do save lives, they do make a
Mhm.
difference, but I'm talking about a sustainable model that
Mhm.
can last. I don't think that that's what is supported here, really. Um, so anyway, whilst I was working in for this humanitarian organization, I developed a passion for gardening. And so that was a little bit the beginning of my holistic health journey, where I started being very aware of anything that I was putting inside my body, so my food, became a very
Mhm.
important topic, and I decided that I wanted to grow my food, and I discovered a new passion, which was the passion of gardening, and I absolutely loved it. And it was so healing and therapeutic for so many reasons. You know, it really healed my soul, to be in contact with the soil and in nature every day, and to see this whole process of life from the seed to the plant was really a magical experience. I became passionate about gardening and about nature, and I thought, oh well, doesn't look like there's much I can do to go and save the human race. So I'm going to go and save the planet instead. Well, that didn't work either,
Mhm.
because I think it was even worse actually,
Mhm.
um, because again, we find the same people creating trying to create a solution, for a problem that they've created, and I couldn't deal with the hypocrisy anymore.
Mhm.
I'd had enough. I wasn't enjoying my job anymore. I wasn't feeling aligned with the organizations that I'd chosen to work with, and it really made me reflect about, you know, who I was and who I wanted to be, who I wanted to become, and to start really um, questioning those things. And I realized that, you know, if you want to change the world, if you really want to change the world, you know, change yourself first.
Because I've been through this sort of transition as well, where you feel like you're waking up to a sort of different reality, and things like our food and our water, and you start to question everything. And so yeah, I'm just obviously you had grown up children at this point, and then you went on to have your son. When was it that you started having these realizations, or waking up, as we say?
Um, it's been quite a journey. Obviously, the 20 years that I've just spoken about in my career were a part of it, but there were a few crucial
Mm-hmm.
elements, and things which happened in my life, um, which were catalysts for my transformation. Um, and the biggest one,
Mm-hmm.
for which I'm most grateful for always, which sounds really crazy now when I speak about it, is that I broke my foot. Um, and I broke my foot, and I was unable to walk for 9 months. It was really, really, really painful. And I'd broken my foot after a series of lots of dramas in my life. And I had a terrible experience. I went to Lebanon. I had a terrible
Mm-hmm.
experience over in Lebanon. I came back, and 1 week later, I broke my foot and I wasn't able to walk for 9 months. And that was really difficult, because I was a really outgoing and social person. I was very dynamic, and suddenly I'm stuck at home, and I don't understand why the universe is doing this to me, why I can't move, why I can't go out and do the things that I want to do. And I felt really angry at that time, and I hit a really sort of dark spot of reflecting of why has this happened to me, you know? But actually, I did this
Mm-hmm.
to me.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing happened to me. All these things that had happened to me were brought into my life by myself. And I needed to sit down, and I needed this time, these 9 months in my life, sat down to reflect upon those things. And in my great moments of desperation, I asked Uncle Google the spiritual meaning of breaking my leg. And Uncle Google diligently responded to me
Mm-hmm.
that I was walking in the wrong direction. You know, that it was the symbolism that it is that you were walking in the wrong direction. And so you break your foot and you have to learn how to walk again in the right direction. And so that was the first catalyst of my
Mm-hmm.
journey. And whilst I
Wow.
sat down during these 9 months, I really sat down and reflected. I had to sit down with myself. I had to sit down with myself. And that was really the most painful thing that I'd ever done. Because when I sat down with myself, I realized that I actually didn't like who I was. I didn't like the life that I was living. I didn't like the choices that I was making. I didn't like the
Mm-hmm.
direction that I was taking my life into. And in fact, I don't think I was taking my life in any particular direction. I was just going with the flow, with any particular direction. I didn't really, I thought I
Mhm.
had a purpose, but I don't think I really had at that time found my purpose. My purpose has always been to serve and help others, but I hadn't really
Mhm.
defined how I wanted to do that at that stage. Um, so yeah, so that was the big catalyst, and then the I would say the next, and it's really at that point that I started working on, you know, my mindset, my habits. I started changing the environment,
Mhm.
you know, breaking up with certain relationships in my life that I felt weren't fulfilling or bringing me anything, and started being a bit more, having more boundaries with myself, and being
Mhm.
more disciplined and focused. So that was, like, I would say, the
Yeah.
first part. Um, and I met the father of my last born at most at that stage, and yeah, a couple of years later, I became pregnant with my beautiful little boy Zion, which I have now, and
Mhm.
Zion's dad is an alcoholic, so it was another really sort of difficult chapter, having this pregnancy with somebody that was suffering from with a terrible addiction, which was really destructive, and it was destructing for him, and it was
Mhm.
destructive for us. Um, and that was the second part where I really sat down and I reflected at, you know, what kind of mother do I want to be? What kind of environment do I want to bring my child in? My two other children had left home. I'd done things in a very traditional way
Mhm.
before. I'd never questioned anything, you know. I had my children when I was 20. They went through the whole educational system. They're fully
Mhm.
jabbed. They had smartphones, as you know, when they were 10 and 11. Like, I never questioned anything. I went with the full narrative. But I always knew there was something, because of my
Mhm.
upbringing and because of my early career. I knew there were some dysfunctions, but I hadn't found my strength and my voice, and I hadn't found a way to empower myself,
Yeah.
um, at that
Yeah.
point.
And I think, being brought up in where you were brought up in the Congo, and you had that connection your intuitive must have been really strong. I imagine having that connection with nature and people, and would you
Yes,
agree
yes,
that?
yeah, yes, no, totally. So that was the second sort of
Yeah.
really sort of key moment, was my last pregnancy, um, because I looked back at my children and the mother that I'd been for 20 years to them, and the upbringing and the life that I'd given them, and who they were becoming, and the
Mm-hmm.
adults that they were becoming. And then I also reflected at the mother that I actually myself really want to be, and the things that I really want to do, and what were my beliefs. And I knew I wanted to do things radically different at that point. It was very clear for me from that minute that everything was going to be radically different. Um, so yeah, and then the last, I think that the cherry on the cake really, was COVID. You know, it was, I think, at that point that I realized this system in which I've been operating for 20 years. I've brought my children into it. I followed their rules. I tried. I got the job. I paid the bills. I've, you know, bought this, did that, did all of this. Um,
Yeah.
and here we are. Now they're isolating us and they want me to watch TV all day. And people are,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was such a, I couldn't believe what was happening there. You know, it felt like surreal. It felt like I was in a sci-fi movie, and I knew I had to step out. I knew I had to step out. I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
how I was going to step out. I didn't know when I was going to step out. But as the same way, I'd realized that the kind of mother that I wanted to be and the kind of upbringing that I wanted to give Zion, I also knew this is not the world and the system in which I want to bring up my child. I want to be somewhere else. Um, so those were, like, I would say, the
Mhm.
three key elements that really sort of, one after the other, were the catalyst for my journey and for wanting to live a different life, homeschool Zion, um, and change, do things the way I believe they should be done. I'm not saying everybody should do things the way I do them, but I know I am doing things in authenticity and in truth with myself, and I think that's the most important.
Yes. So, what was at that moment when you thought, I'm leaving the UK?
So what exactly happened is I had an actual burnout with life. Like, I got to a point where, after,
Mm.
the pregnancy, COVID, going back to work, I had a job which was extremely demanding. I was working for a big international environmental agency, um,
Mm.
and I had a very demanding role. I was working very long hours. I was also trying to make a relationship work, and at the back of having had this addiction problem in the family, and there'd been lots of violence and lots of things that, I think, came to a point where, you couldn't go back from these things. So between the job that was overwhelming, the relationship, it had come to that point. I was working long hours. I was still growing my food, because that was pretty much, my thread to life, be going to the garden and putting my hands in the soil and spending
Mhm.
time outside. And I thought, that's it. I cannot do this anymore. I'm retiring. I'm not retiring, by the way, but I just thought,
Mhm.
this is really no longer how I want
Mhm.
to live my life. And if you really want to change your life, you've got to make a decision to change your life, and you've got to take action. And I'd
Mhm.
been saying that I
Mhm.
wanted to change my life now for the last 3 or 4 years. And there's lots of things that had changed in my life. I used to party a lot. I used to drink a lot. I used to smoke a lot. I was a completely different person. So I'd already changed a lot of things, you know. But for me, it was time to take things
Mhm.
to another level. I wanted to go and live a life closer to nature. That was really important for me. I wanted to step out a little bit from the crowd. I needed time for myself. I needed quiet, and I needed the peace from nature, and I couldn't find it in the chaos of city life here, with a job, with a kid, with a relationship, with social demands. It was too
Yeah.
much. So I packed up. Oh, I bought tickets and I packed up.
Did you have a plan? Did you pack up and just, yeah,
I had a plan and I didn't have a plan.
to go to you
And
went
to
to
Portugal,
Portugal?
yeah. I had a plan and I
Mhm.
didn't have a plan. I had a plan. I had a plan to change my life. I had a plan to
Mhm.
make it beautiful. And I think what's really important to say is that, about 6 months before I made the decision to actually leave and actually left, I started my own online business. So I started creating my own brand online, and I started monetizing my social media. So my plan was just really to change my environment, get out, and expand. Because where I was right now, where I was right there in the UK, I wasn't expanding anymore. I felt like I was stuck. I was burnt out. I was at a bottleneck. I needed to come out, and I needed to breathe, and I needed to expand.
Mm.
And so 6 months before I'd started this, I'd affiliated with Enagic, and I started distributing Kangen water, which I love. We can talk about the water afterwards, but
Mm-hmm.
so that was the plan, was to continue focusing on on developing my business and
Yeah.
developing my brand and refining my message, really
Mm-hmm.
tuning in with who I was and the message that I wanted to share with others. Um, and yeah, that was the plan, really. The plan was to heal. And also, oh,
Mm-hmm.
very important,
Mm-hmm.
actually, which I'm forgetting here. How can I even forget it? Was to homeschool Zion. And I couldn't see myself homeschooling Zion here in Oxford in the UK. I wanted an environment which was much more like the one I had when I was a child, which was, you know, um, wilderness and mountains and rivers and oceans. I wanted him to have the
Mm-hmm.
space to run around. And I wanted him to be in an environment that would develop his curiosity about the
Mm-hmm.
world and that would make him ask questions. I wanted him, yeah. So those were the reasons why I left for Portugal.
And you had your Kangen business at this point because you are now you're self-employed businesswoman, and I totally feel because you're homeschooling, so am I, and also running a business as well. So I know that's not easy, but you're doing it, and you share a lot on social media. You share your life. It's so nice to watch because obviously that's how I came about and asked you to come on and share your story because I've watched your journey and honestly, what a beautiful life. And I don't believe that it's just the sort of Instagram life that is the life that you're
Mm-hmm.
living. But I know it's hard as well because I'm going through a big life change right now with selling up and moving on. And yeah, do you want to talk a bit about maybe the challenges as well of living that type of life?
Coming back here, people kind of like, oh yeah, you've been on the holiday for so long. I'm like, on holiday? Yeah, it's just crazy. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not on holiday. I'm a full-time mum for a start. I'm in charge of my son's education, and I'm very busy throughout the day
Mm-hmm.
looking after him. So, and yes, also
Mm-hmm.
building my business. So the challenges, it's interesting to think about the challenges. The challenges really is learning how to let go of what might happen and living in faith and
Mm-hmm.
holding that belief, because sometimes it might feel lonely, sometimes things are not necessarily, going the way I want them to go. um, but just holding that faith and that belief that I'm in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing in accordance to who I
Mm-hmm.
am, and that I am fulfilling my God given duty of being with my son and raising my son, um,
Mm-hmm.
is then having to let go of maybe sometimes the fears that I have, because I still have fears like everyone else. I do sometimes fear what is the future going to bring? What is it going to be like? And what about this? And having to
Yeah.
detach myself from that is the biggest challenge. And just simply living in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
in the present, and letting go and just surrendering to whatever comes to me. I think that has been the biggest challenge, because I've
Mm-hmm.
always been a very kind of control freak. I want to do this job, I want to do it like this, and I want to earn that much, and I like to have things under control. And I actually don't have anything under control, really. It's just all in the moment. And having to let go. But this is also what's the
Mm-hmm.
most fulfilling, actually, is that when you let go, everything is okay. Everything is always okay. If you look at the history of your life, it
Yes.
always ends up okay. You know, the minute you walk in alignment
Yes.
and on the path that you are destined to walk, there's no
Mm-hmm.
need to worry about how it's going to happen. It's just going to happen.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think that's a big challenge.
Yep, it's so true. And that's what's getting me through just now
Yeah.
as well. So now you're doing, obviously, you've got your Kangen business, and I know that this is something that you're passionate about. You're healing yourself and educating others. I have noticed that, and for me, I've learned a lot as well. I already had water filter, and I am, you know, but thankfully in Scotland we do have good water, but obviously you've got your heavy metals coming through the tap and all your chemicals. So I was aware of that, but I hadn't heard of Kangen until I came across yourself. And I know that this is just something that you're really passionate about for yourself that you've turned into a business now. So do you want to talk us about that and how you know what Kangen
Yeah.
is, why it's important?
Yeah, sure. So I think, I mean, I touched a little bit upon this at the beginning of our conversation, where um, when I started on this holistic health journey or self development journey, however you may wish to call it, um,
Mm-hmm,
I focused on changing my habits and my
mm-hmm,
environment and my diet. And, you know, your habits is what you
mm-hmm,
eat, what you drink, what you watch, what you listen. It's all sorts of things. But I very much focused on the food
mm-hmm,
that I was eating. I've also sort of through my career, the issue of food sovereignty has been something which has always been very close to my heart, because I believe that we all deserve access to fresh and healthy food. So I focused all my attention on the food and growing
mm-hmm,
the food and
mm-hmm.
using regenerative methods and organic and all of that. And then I hadn't really thought about the water. I think really I have to be completely honest. I focused all my attention on the food and I didn't really focus that much on the water. I was drinking bottled water, I was drinking filtered water, but I actually hadn't questioned things that much further. I mean, I was not using, taking the fluoride off my toothpaste. I knew tap water had fluoride and toxins and all sorts of stuff. And then I came across somebody
Mm-hmm.
that introduced me to ionized water. So Kangen water is living structured water. So it's water which is alive, basically, as you would find it probably in the mountains, in the highlands of Scotland. So water which is naturally charged with minerals, which is alive. It's loaded with
Mm-hmm.
molecular hydrogen. Um, which is the smallest molecule and also the most powerful antioxidant. So it goes past your blood-brain barrier and fights off, free radicals and, the oxidization process in your body. And really, when you realize that
Mm-hmm.
we are water beings, our bodies are 70% water, our brains are water, our organs are water, and nothing in life or in nature functions without water. Yet, most of the water that we have access to is dead, right? The
Mm-hmm.
water through the tap has been through that system so many times. And it's the same thing with bottled water, which has been sat on the shelves of supermarkets or storage units for years on years. So I really started, questioning the water. And when this person started talking to me about ionized water and what it actually was and what it did, I became very curious about it and started doing a lot of research around the water. Um, and I was like, I need one of, I need this machine in my life. And so that's what I did. I got this machine in my life. And it's the best thing I've ever done. Because I don't think people realize that most of us are completely dehydrated. Actually, we're not quite functioning, because when you start drinking this water which is alive, water which is
Mm-hmm.
fully charged with minerals and with molecular hydrogen, you have more energy, you feel better, you sleep better. um, And then when you think about all the extraordinary healing properties that this water has in terms of detoxification, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, it's the best thing in the world. I would never ever look back. And
Mm-hmm.
the wonderful thing about it is that it came with this fantastic business opportunity. I could affiliate myself with this product, and
Mm-hmm.
monetize my brand, by sharing this incredible water with the rest of the world, and helping people heal themselves physically,
Mm-hmm.
spiritually, because water is energy, water is frequency, you know. And if you think about it, everything is about flow and
Yeah.
energy and streams. Everything relates to water in our life. We are water. Everything is movement. We are movement. So
Mm-hmm.
I love the idea that I'm now, you know, sharing this water with people around the world, and I really think that is my purpose, to help people heal themselves, through, you know, better choices for their lives, their diet, you know, what they're drinking. And this water is at the core of everything, because you can survive. I don't know how many days you can survive without eating. I think maybe 30 days you can survive without eating, but I don't think you can't survive more than 3 days
Yeah.
without water. So that just tells you how important water is in your life. We need water, and we need to drink the best water. Apologies, my computer's making noise. Um,
Yeah.
we need water in order to survive, and this is living structured water. This is water which is alive. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
has bubbles. It's not carbonated. It's just natural, hydrogen, in the level of molecular hydrogen in the water. And it really has transformed my life, in so many ways. I mean, I really feel the difference, um, of being hydrated as to how I felt before in my life. It has incredible therapeutic and healing properties, and I love it, and I just want to share it with
Yeah.
everyone.
I've loved learning about it as well from watching you share, and you can tell, you share it
Mhm.
passionately, and in a way that just that educates people and gives them the information, and whatever they want to do with that information is fine. But yeah, it's amazing when you can find something in your life that you're passionate about and that you feel strongly about, that you can then share and turn into, I don't like the word career or even business, but we need to earn money in
No,
this world to
no, no.
survive. So yeah, it's amazing when you can find something you're passionate about and that will help others, and that's how you make your living, and you can design your life around that, which is exactly what you've done.
Yeah,
So I know that you're in the UK just
yeah. I was
now.
going to say what's also been incredible with this water is that it has connected me with, um, an entire global community of people like myself, you know, people who are healing, people who are making a difference, people who are choosing to live different lives at the service of others, people, you know, homesteaders, homeschoolers, people like-minded people.
Yeah. And you're in the UK just now. I know that you're back visiting your older son and your daughter. So and you're heading back to Portugal
Yes,
this week. So what's the future hold? Do you have a plan or
so,
yeah?
do I have a plan? The plan was to go back to Portugal, so I'm executing that one on Sunday. And the plan is to find, a
Mm-hmm.
more permanent place. So, the last 8 months, I've spent a bit of time going around because I really wanted to find, um, the right place where I could settle, for some time, where there would be the right community, and I found that place about 1 month only before I came back. And I really found this place, which it was really interesting, because we have plans, but these visions change, and that's fine. You know, you can have a bigger vision.
Yeah.
Along the way, things can change. And I had very much this idea that I would be
Mm-hmm.
living in the mountains, you know, that was very much the vision. I made it happen, you know, it happened, and I went to the mountains and I stayed there, and it was amazing. But it didn't feel like that was the right place for me at the for lots of other reasons. I don't drive, so it was really complicated for me to move around because it was super isolated. So I moved a little bit around, and
Mhm.
I remember having this vision of being by a cliff and seeing the ocean, and didn't know where that was really coming from, but it was there and it was very strongly in my head. Just like when I was, before I went to the mountains, I had this very clear vision about this small house in the mountains with red terracotta tiles and a little wood burner. I suddenly had this vision about a cliff in the ocean. And when I arrived where I am, my daughter came to visit me a couple of weeks after I arrived, and we were walking in this particular area, which is like the Land's End of Portugal. It's called Cabo Espichal, and it's a very beautiful place. And I was walking there, and suddenly I stopped. And my daughter was like, "What's going on with you?" And I said, I've seen this place. I've seen this place. And I'd seen this place. I'd seen it here. It, and I knew I was home. And I was like, okay, this
Mhm.
is where I am meant to be for now. And then I spent a month sort of discovering the area. We walked along the coast and did lots of tours around. And I really feel that I have found the place where I'd like to stay now for some time. So the plan is to find more permanent
Mhm.
accommodation, because at the moment we live in a 5 meter square container. And we can't stay there eternally. We'd like something with a bit more space, at least a bigger kitchen, because I love cooking. Um, but
Mhm.
to find a more permanent place with a little garden and start growing my food again. So that's kind of the direction that I'm going
Mhm.
into, and fully settling, I guess, into this move, because I think I realized this when I came back this time, that there was still actually quite a lot of things that I'd left here, that I hadn't fully cut ties with yet. And
Mhm.
this particular trip has been really helpful in that sense, and has helped me cut those ties. And I think now moving forward is going to be much more
Mhm.
straightforward in that sense, is that I'm really letting go of things that really do not belong to my future
Mhm.
anymore. So the plan is to see what the universe has in store for me, obviously to continue growing my business and hopefully to travel. I'd like to travel this year. I'd like to go to Africa. I've had thoughts about going back to India. I'd like to travel a little bit more. But there is this you know, ultimately my long-term
Yeah.
vision is to homestead and, you know, have a big farm and have my own animals and learn how to slaughter my own animals and grow my food. I dream of a very big flower garden as well. I love flowers, so I'd love a big flower garden. You know, that's the long-term vision really, and that we could, as a family,
Yeah.
grow this farm and keep it together and sustain ourselves. Really,
Mhm.
really, what I'm looking for
Yeah.
is being
And
able to sustain ourselves without any external interference.
mhm. Yeah. And I think that's really inspiring for anyone else who's got that niggle, because it's scary. I mean, making a decision like that. And I'm going through this just now where I don't really have a plan. I don't know where I'm going to be this time next year, but it's very liberating. And it's when I feel that when you're being true to yourself and your values and doing what feels good rather than what you think you should be doing, like you say, you just trust that everything will unfold as it's meant to and it
And it
will
does.
work out. Mhm.
It's incredible. You know, that you
Mhm.
really have to trust. And I'm just going to say this again, that you are at the right place at the right time exactly where you are meant to be, and that everything
Mhm.
will unfold as it's meant to be. When I reflect on the past 8 months of traveling in Portugal and how our whole journey unfolded up to this point here at Christmas, where I'm back in the UK, and I reflect at the, the people who have come along my journey, how they have appeared, who they are,
Mhm.
what they have shared, what they have brought. It's magical. It's absolutely magical. Like the universe just sends you what you need when you need it.
Mhm.
But are you ready to receive it? That's quite often,
Yeah.
because we're so conditioned, and people are rushing around from, when I came back here, I felt I was like in a madhouse. I went to town and everyone's running around from one shop to another, not really paying attention to anything, and everybody's down on their phone. And
Yeah.
I'm like, this is the madhouse. Um,
Mhm.
we're so automated that we don't look at the signs anymore. We don't listen to ourselves, and we don't look at the signs anymore. But there are plenty of signs out there all the time. There are plenty of opportunities constantly. um, but if you're not looking, if you're not paying attention, you're not going to see them. So sometimes it's worth slowing down a little bit in life
Mhm.
just to receive those signs and take notice of them, and go with
Yeah.
them, and trust them.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your
You're
journey,
welcome, Karen.
and for letting
I'm
people
so
hear.
grateful.
I do think your story is very inspiring, and I do recommend that they go and check you out. I know Instagram is where you share, and it's lovely watching your journey unfold. So I can't wait to continue watching and see where you end
Thank
up.
you so much, Karen. I'm so excited to have started this new year with you. As I was telling you earlier, I was really excited to start the day today with this conversation. So thank you so much for inviting me and giving me an
Mhm.
opportunity to share my story with everyone.
You're so welcome. I hope you enjoyed listening to Laura's story. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button. Details on how to contact Laura are in the description below. I do highly recommend checking out her Instagram page where she shares her journey. Don't forget to subscribe, you'll be notified when a new episode comes out.